Over the weekend, I read a thought-provoking blog from Barry Ritholtz, who is author of The Big Picture. And his blog is based on the premise that the best estimate right now is we are at the halfway point of this pandemic. We're likely to return to some form of normality next June, say. So assuming we're at the halfway point right now, how are you going to spend the next half of your pandemic? That's what I'm going to take a look at in this video. Hi everyone, I'm Martin Bamford, a chartered financial planner at Informed Choice, and it's been a few good weeks, hasn't it, for pandemic-related news, if we can call it good weeks. We've had some fantastic news about various vaccine trials in late-stage testing and about to receive emergency regulatory approval. We could have a series of effective vaccines available to bring this horrible COVID-19 pandemic under control in the coming months and years. However, the best estimates are that the vaccines won't be available until the start of next year, and then it will take time, it will take several months for an effective rollout of the vaccination programme in different countries around the world. We could be well into the second half of the year before we start seeing some real herd immunity in our society. And this really was the premise of the blog I read by Barry Ritholtz on The Big Picture, and I'll put a link to that blog in the description below. It's well worth the read, it'll only take 5 minutes of your time. But what Barry points out is that the pandemic and lockdown measures started effectively in March 2020. Let's assume that it's through until June 2021 before we see some sort of return to normality, whatever that normality might look like. So not so much social distancing, the ability to go to a restaurant with friends, to attend sporting events, to travel, to go on holiday freely. So March this year through till June next year, a 16-month period. And what he points out is, therefore, we're at the halfway point of this pandemic, making some assumptions, of course. We don't know for sure when we're going to see a return to normality. But that raises a really interesting set of questions. If we're at the halfway point right now, how are you going to spend the next half of your pandemic? What are you going to get done? What things are you going to achieve? It's reasonable, I think, to say that this pandemic is horrible. You know, people are dying. Those people who get ill but don't die, in many cases, are suffering what is now being called long COVID. So some quite serious health problems for the long term afterwards. The economy is being trashed. We're losing small businesses left, right and centre. And of course the social distancing measures mean that we can't see family, friends, loved ones, we can't hug people, we can't share that intimacy with them. And it's horrible for all of those reasons, but at the same time, of course, where there's bad, there's good. And there are many positives to come out of this pandemic as well. I think COVID-19 has resulted in a massive wake-up call for many people that their lifestyle before was perhaps unsustainable, unfulfilling, not rewarding. And they've had a taste now of how things could be done differently, perhaps less frenetic, perhaps less crowded, with more time to think, more time to do the things that you want. Obviously, restrictions in place on doing everything you want, but certainly more time to think, more time to breathe. And it's about taking the good from a pandemic, those lessons, that taste of a different life, and making conscious decisions about how you're going to spend your life and spend your time in the future. That's so important. If we can come away from this pandemic with just a few lessons learned about what a better life looks like, and the fact it's not as scary as we thought it was, to do things like remote working, to drop the horrible daily commute, those lessons are so valuable, they teach us so much. But back to that question, how will you allocate your extra time in lockdown? Let's assume we are at the halfway point. What will you do with that time? What do you want to achieve? Before you answer that question, I want to share with you another thought-provoking blog. This one dates back to May 2014. It was written by Tim Urban on his blog Wait But Why. And again, I'll put a link to this one in the show notes. It's possibly one of the most thought-provoking blogs I've ever read, and it really frames and puts in context this notion of a finite human life. It's something we should all be thinking about on a regular basis. So Tim Urban visualizes the human life in years, in months, and in days as squares on a chart. And it's an incredibly powerful way of visualizing our finite time on this planet, a relative lack of time to get things done. And also within this blog post, Tim Urban visualises the human life in a different way, and that's by taking a 0.05 carat diamond, about 2 millimeters wide, and placing one for every week of a typical 90-year human life on a spoon. It turns out there's 4,680 weeks in a 90-year human life, and you place 4,680 of these small diamonds on a spoon, and it just about fills a tablespoon of diamonds. But of course, watching this, you're not a newborn baby, at least I hope you're not, so you don't have a full or a nearly full tablespoon of diamonds. You might say have half of that, and then you visualise a 16-month pandemic, assuming that is the length of a pandemic when everything comes out in a wash. And that's 60 of your diamonds used up by that point. So I guess the question there becomes, were those diamonds well spent? Those ones you've used up, those 60 diamonds during that 16-month window, when time has behaved differently, when different opportunities have arisen from restrictions that we faced. How have you spent your 60 diamonds? So back to that big question then, how will you allocate your time? How will you allocate your diamonds in the second half of that pandemic? And in his blog, Barry Ritholtz very helpfully shares some of the things that he's planning to do. He's already starting to work on his next book, for example. I know novel writing is a big goal, a big ambition for a great many people. But he's doing other things too. He's working on his most important relationship. He's studying astrophysics, something that he was passionate about as a younger man. He is developing a better exercise habit. I'm sure these are all things, maybe astrophysics apart, that we can all identify with, things we want to achieve in life. Because I think when all of this ends, you can look back to the start of it, you can look back to March, and you can kick yourself and say, well, why didn't I write my book? Why did I not become fluent in French? Why didn't I lose 20 pounds? There's little sense in living this life full of regrets. In fact, all we can really influence is the future. But knowing that we're potentially at the halfway point of the pandemic right now, we can influence what we do next. We can make conscious decisions about how we spend that time and what we do with it. My own answer to that question, how are you going to spend the second half of the pandemic? Well, I'm certainly focusing on my fitness. I recently took delivery of a Peloton spin bike, and I'm trying to develop a good habit of using that 3 or 4 times a week to do some quite tough workouts. I'm still recovering from COVID, so I'm sort of limiting my exposure to that a little bit. I'm not pushing myself as hard as I could, but I was quite fit a few years back, and then the habits fell away. What I'd really love to achieve is getting back to a fitness I had when I could run an ultramarathon. And in fact, there's one in the spring that I quite like the look of and I've signed up for. So part of my fitness journey is becoming fit enough to go and run 50, 60 kilometres in one go. But we'll see how that one goes. Like Barry, I'm keen to write my next book. Or at least I thought I was keen to write my next book. I think in reality, what I'll be doing is creating some courses, some online courses around personal finance, because I think that's a more modern and a more accessible way to share some of the knowledge and experience I have in a way that will make, hopefully, a meaningful difference to a lot of people. And developing those courses goes hand in hand for me with developing this YouTube channel, growing this YouTube channel, and also continuing to grow our personal finance podcast, Informed Choice Radio. I need to put more work into those. I need to plan them better, structure them better, and invest in them to make them grow. Because one of my goals, and this is a business goal, but it's also has a knock-on effect for my personal life, is to move away from working with clients on a one-to-one basis and move to more of a one-to-many basis, what was explained by Kevin Kelly in his blog 1000 True Fans. And part of that is growing a YouTube channel and growing the podcast, and then developing materials like online courses, which people who watch these YouTube videos, who listen to our podcast, who read the blogs, want to buy and actually offer real value to them in their lives. As life does start to return to normal, something else that's high on my list is how I give back to our local community, and I'm eagerly awaiting the return of Parkrun. I was the founding event director of our local parkrun, and then a couple of years ago handed the reins over to some other local people because life and business was taking over. But I'm now desperate to get back. I see the role that parkrun plays, not just for people's fitness, but as a social event and a way of developing friendships and real camaraderie, which I think is going to be so important as we come through this pandemic. So once Parkrun restarts, I've volunteered to become event director once more, and that will be my Saturday morning, giving back to our local community and helping to continue to grow that very successful movement. And I'd like to read more books too, and that means spending less time or wasting less time on social media. And last but not least, I want to make sure I ring fence every weekend for genuine family time. It's far too easy as a business owner, as somebody who's self-employed, to allow the weekends to merge into the weeks in the same way my evenings tend to do. So to be more intentional about how I spend my time and that time I commit to my family. There was another Tim Urban blog that came out about a year later following that one I mentioned earlier, Your Life in Weeks, and it was called The Tail End. And in that one, I think Tim Urban really put a lot of this into context. He visualised again and worked out approximately, based on an average life expectancy of say 90 years, how many ocean swims he would have left, given how many he tends to do each year, how many books he would read in the rest of his lifetime, how many times he would see his parents in the rest of their lifetime. And again, I think we need these stark reminders to just wake us up sometimes, tell us that time is finite and that we can either coast through life unintentionally, and that's fine, some people make that decision or don't make that decision and end up doing it. I think we need these regular wake-up calls, these reminders that life is finite and we have a choice, conscious or not, to either coast through life with no intentions, no goals, no plans, or to take the reins, take real control over how we spend our time, how we allocate that finite time in our lives. So I end again with that question. Assuming we're at the halfway point of the pandemic, how will you spend the next 6 to 8 months? What will you achieve during that time? What will you do differently? Thank you for watching this video. Please do press that subscribe button for more like this. I talk about personal finance, economics, investing, and happiness as well. Please press like as well. That really helps us with the YouTube algorithm. It helps more people discover our video content in the future as well. Until next time, I'm Martin Bamford. And remember, when it comes to your money, the more you know, the faster it can grow.